Hi, this is Catherine and welcome back to Taking Tea with Catherine. Today I'm drinking Tower of London tea, one of my favorites from Harney & Sons. And Harney & Sons is a New York-based company and lovely shop in Soho and lovely shop upstate from what I'm told, but I've only been to the Soho one. And it's called Tower of London, so we've got the New York/London connection. Very nice and slightly fruity and sweet. No need to add sweetener. So I'm talking about New York and London today because I'm talking about Helene Hanff, who wrote 84 Charing Cross Road. More on that in a minute. So another connection I'm doing here, I like to mention things once in a while. I don't want to get too personal, but this cardigan was given to me by my grandmother, who just coincidentally happened to be born the same year as Helene Hanff, and for a long period of time lived in the same city as her. They probably never met each other, but, life. Anything's possible. They were actually both sort of in show business, so it's possible, but doubtful. And I never got a chance to ask my grandmother, so, you regret certain things. Because she died, sadly, 20 years ago this week. So, tiny little tribute. But yeah, a little reminder, guys, if you have parents, grandparents that you care about, which you should, hopefully, any relatives that are older than you, and have history, even if it's not history that you find that interesting. They could be from some, obscure area and they've just, been just carried on in a very normal life. You would think so, but you know what? You get to know people and you get to know their stories and there's always something to learn. So even though, yes, I did ask my grandmother questions and I did hear a lot of stories from her, I still regret not asking enough and not learning enough. So yeah, that's a good effort to try to make, because not everyone writes about their life, as did Helene Hanff. And, well, this book isn't her just writing about her life. It's incidental to that. It is a story of Helene Hanff wanting to get a hold of some books in a time period, so I think it starts in 1949, a time period where, yeah, there were plenty of bookshops in New York, but apparently it was hard to get good certain types of British literature, as it is still sometimes today, to be honest, in the bookshops that are affordable. For instance, I have to say, those old Penguin books, the ones that kind of have the orange, stripy kind of orange and white, or the green and white, or any other ones, it is so hard to find a copy of those around. I have found them before, but they're very hard to find. I would have to order from someone in the UK most of the time. Anyway, long story short, even though I have access to a lot of books that she probably couldn't find because of things like, Amazon, Book Depository, Thrift Books, Libraris, I'm sure I'm forgetting other ones. Back then, not as easy, I guess, but she had a copy of a magazine called the Saturday Review, saw an ad, and this is, just came to her notice that this lovely bookshop on 84 Charing Cross Road in London sold used and out-of-print books. She wrote to this bookshop, to whom it may concern, spoke of her concerns. They wrote back, sending her books that she requested and an invoice, and it was infinitely affordable and beautifully bound copies that she really loved. So she just kept going. She kept writing to these people and finally got the name of the person who was mostly corresponding with her, Frank Dwell, and then became a correspondence of 20 years of bookish love. And I just love this book. You don't know everything about their lives, but it's still great. So I think she changed the names of some of the people in here too. But her humor comes through. She writes like almost sarcastically, almost angry, but you can tell she's not really angry. So I'm going to read one of the letters that she wrote in the adaptation, film adaptation. It's read as well, but for one thing that she did, which I thought was great, is that she sent packages from other parts of Europe to provide the people of during different holidays, whatever, as gifts of food that during rationing people in the UK had a hard time getting a hold of, and she sent that as gifts, so they appreciate that. So there's a slight reference to that here. So she writes in 1952 to Frank, Sloth, I could rot over here before you'd send me anything to read. I ought to run straight down to Brentano's, which I would if anything I wanted was in print. By the way, Brentano's existed when I was a kid. It's gone now. You may add Walton's Lives to the list of books you aren't sending me. It's against my principles to buy a book I haven't read. It's like buying a dress you haven't tried on. But you can't even get Walton's Lives in a library over here. You can look at it. They have it down at the 42nd Street branch. But not to take home, the lady said to me, shocked. Eat it here. I don't think I read that right. Whatever. Just sit right down in room 315 and read the whole book without a cup of coffee, a cigarette, or air. Doesn't matter. Q quoted enough of it so I know I'll like it. Now, this is good for Nonfiction November. Anything he liked, I'll like, except if it's fiction. I never can get interested in things that didn't happen to people who never lived. I thought that was kind of nice, you know? What do you do with yourself all day? Sit in the back of the store and read? Why don't you try selling a book to somebody? Miss Hanff to you. I'm Helene only to my friends. P.S. Tell the girls and Nora if all goes well, they're getting nylons for Lent. So that's just a little taste of her sense of humor and the way she wrote and her explanations of why she couldn't get a hold of books and, of course, why she liked nonfiction books over fiction. And doesn't mean she hated fiction altogether, because at one point she mentions Jane Austen. It's just her preference, and I just thought that was fitting for this month. So great book, and it doesn't end there. One thing she refers to in this book is that someone asked her to write the story of her life in a book. And I did get a hold of that book once. It was a library book. I haven't been able to purchase it. Maybe I should look for it. Anyway, it's called Underfoot in Show Business. So that was her, at the time, I think it was in the 50s that she wrote it, maybe early 60s. And it was just about her trying to make a living as a script reader / writer who worked around Broadway and knew a lot of people in show business, but she just couldn't make a big successful effort. But you know what? She may not think so, but now we know that she is more well known than some people of that time period. So I don't know if that matters, but it's a pretty good story. A little bit of a horror story in the middle of it when she encounters bedbugs in an apartment. Yeah, PTSD. But so yeah, the story does not end there. There is a sequel, which is not a book of letters. There may be like one or two letters quoted in here, but it's basically a telling of her first visit to the UK, the Duchess of Bloomsbury Street, which I think is the street where her hotel was. And it's just about her first trip to the UK, and I love it. And that's all there is to it. She just tours places that she's wanted to see. And, sometimes some things she says I don't even agree with. Like, she's not really that into going to bookshops. And I was like, but you're there. But, everybody has a different way of thinking and a different way of living. So, really great. By the time she got to London, she was older than I am now. And it's hard to think of that, We're so used to getting what we want now. But you know what? She had to go through so many different expenses that weren't covered by, say, she had root canals. Many root canals that she had to deal with that are extremely expensive. If you've ever had one root canal, I have had two in my life. And I had to only pay co-payment. And it was so expensive. So I get it. I totally get why she couldn't make it over for a long time. In the beginning, she's speaking of taking a boat over, taking one of the ships that they used to have over. And then by the time she gets over there, going transatlantic on a flight is much more common. So that shows how long it takes for her to get over. Great story, good, not very long. So you guys, if you don't like big books, you don't have to read a big book. Then we get into another book that she wrote. Well, this is a collection of sort of stories, and not stories, it's nonfiction, but like her own little encounters and things that happened to her in New York. Apple of my eye. So, yeah, I kind of, I like this too, as someone who has grown up in New York and likes a lot of the places that she likes in New York. Like, she's very fond of Central Park, which I am too. She's a little less fond of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which seems to be encroaching during her time on Central Park. Like, it's expanded into the park. Me, I tend to like this. I like going to the museum, for instance, and just wandering along, having a look at books. Not books. Well, actually, yes, books. There are books in the museum. But paintings and sculptures and whatever, and you get a little inspired or you want to think about it, and afterwards you could walk into Central Park and think about it. I mean, she used to go back then when Central Park was a bit not great. It's been since restored quite a lot to its early glories, and either way, I like both of them. It's okay that she really didn't care for the museum as much. She writes about a lot of places that are no longer there, like Gimbel's department store, which I think my father worked in at some point. And she also writes about places that are still around, like Rockefeller Center, etc. And if you are interested in reading about New York, this is a good one. So, we have New York and London all together, and she's still hilarious. Now this, if you don't get a hold of Underfoot and Show Business, you kind of almost don't need it, because this book, Hughes Legacy, basically covers what you would need to know about Helene Hanff's life. She writes a little bit about her first learning of the existence of Q, who is Arthur Quiller Couch, who was an Oxford student, graduate, who also taught at Cambridge. So, scholarly. I think I mentioned him once before because, turning my back on you guys. Oh, it's being covered. I'm covering things now. But okay, around here somewhere I have a collection of Oxford Book of English Verse, and which is also mentioned in 84 Charing Cross Road. And it's compiled by this same Sir Arthur Quiller Couch. That is his name, right? Arthur Quiller Couch. And it's just Quiller Dash Couch, by the way. Dash. She saw his, I guess, collection of lectures or something, and he had books that he referred to. And she basically was an autodidact. She had gone to college, but I don't think she finished it. And she learned about English literature through his references, and that's why she started getting hold of his recommendations, and just kept, and then you read one book, you suddenly fall down a rabbit hole and read about more books. And that also led to her wanting to read the books that she needed to get a hold of in 84 Charing Cross Road. So it all comes full circle, but this speaks a little bit more of after the publishing of 84 Charing Cross Road, and how she, how the reaction was, and how it affected her or didn't affect her sometimes, and just her life in general. And also there's a part where she sees it being performed in a play, and how interesting that is to see that come to life, and her, from her point of view. So that's just a little overview of the books that I have, or the books that I've read of hers. I think that's almost all of them. She wrote for the TV show Ellery Queen, which is, I guess, a kind of mystery series of mysteries, which I should read, because I'm interested in mysteries, but I don't know if I could get a hold of hers per se. Not exactly sure. I have done a lot of research on her stuff, but I'm not sure of everything. Long story short, it's not a lot to read, so if you're interested but didn't want to commit too much, you're really not going to commit too much. And also just so many great references to books that you may not have heard of, or have rarely heard of, that she asks for. I had read about Leigh Hunt's essays in her book, and I got a hold of them, and it ended up being, to me anyway, quite interesting. And just various different types of literature, and mostly nonfiction literature, British, mostly English literature. So if you are interested in having more references and more books to put on your TBR, which I know you are, because you can never have too many books on your TBR. These books are really great, especially 84 Charing Cross Road in that respect, but also Hughes Legacy, etc. So it could give you almost like a course of your own, if you know what I mean. So yeah, that's my little sum up of the life of Helene Hanff through the books that I've read of hers, and I'm so glad I finally mentioned her again, because I'm so sad that in my post, I can't speak English again, about favorite nonfiction writers, how I left her out. I think that is a big shame, but maybe it's because I needed to devote entire, how many minutes? Almost 15 minutes to her, I guess. So, if you've read 84 Charing Cross Road, of course I always like to talk about it, but if you've read any of these other books, because I rarely know anybody else, not because I'm this big hipster show-off, but I rarely know anyone else who has read any of these other books. So I'm curious to see what other people think about them, and if they like them, or if they like them better or less. So if you have anything to say about these, please leave a comment down below. I just love talking about her. I blogged about her a number of times, I think on like one of the anniversaries of her first letter, because I'm crazy like that. And maybe I'll post those links down below. Who could know? All right, so that's all for now. This has been Catherine from Taking Tea with Catherine, and have a lovely reading day.